We conclude today chapter 7, speaking about the lower level of teshuva. Teshuva, which means to return. And what are you returning? Well, you're returning to God, and you're returning to your true self. Tashuv Hey, to return the Hey in God's name, and that part of God that's within us that has fallen through falling off the bandwagon, off the wagon, which means any kind of transgression against the will of God. So it's the latter Hey in God's name that we return, which is called Tshuva Tata, the lower level of Tshuva. And in this we explain that there are two parts to this that are necessary. One is to recognize your true greatness is the divine soul that you have and what you've done to it. First recognize greatness, and then how that greatness has come down to a low place through doing things that we shouldn't do. And the second thing, and that's what we've been concentrating on, is to subdue, subjugate, even crush the negative nature that I have within me. And as the Alter Rebbe said yesterday, that's called Mara de Chujbana, that's called a master of accounts. It's owning your stuff. So, right, if you face your stuff, that's better than stuffing your face, as we explained yesterday. So the truth is, what we say about your stuff, what stuff are we talking about? Talking about like heavy duty stuff, like the things that are the real negative things about us and about the transgressions that we do before God. And that's what we learned till now, that there are things that can cut us off, and we need to return. We need to reconnect. Today the Alter Rebbe says, well, even if it's a transgression that is not liable for any kind of early death from the hands of heaven, and nothing tremendous, nonetheless, it can have an effect that can really cut us off. And he begins with a metaphor, or a couple metaphors. The rope metaphor, right? Oops. 613 strands of a rope, right, that connect us. But if let's say there's only one of the mitzvahs that, it's not a huge thing, but repeatedly we're just disconnecting and cutting that part of the rope. So I don't know exactly how it goes metaphorically, because you got 613 strands and only one strand. But so I don't know if it works with the metaphor exactly. But the point is that we weaken the rope, that it can finally, if this repeatedly the same thing over and over is cut, is separated, is disconnected, it can affect the entire rope and disconnect us from God. Another metaphor that he gives is clouds, thin clouds. But if you have many thin clouds, it obstructs the sunlight. Or take a window, and you can have a very thick drape that blocks everything out. Or you can have very thin drape that doesn't block. But if you put many of them, then eventually it'll be the same thing as the thick drape, the thick curtain, and it will obscure. The light will not come through. And this is likened to those things in our lives that are, shall we say, sins that we're indifferent to because they seemingly are very small and insignificant. It's like everybody does it, kind of thing. um, and and it's like natural almost. But yet, if it's done consistently, constantly, then it has the same effect as a terrible sin. That's pretty well. So he gives some examples over here, and also the examples on how our sages look at it, even though seemingly, how could you make the comparison? But comparison is made. For example, ignoring the needy, right? You're busy and you ignore the needy, or you just, there's a lot of needy people, so you ignore this one or that one. Um, so our sages have said that that's based on the verse in Devarim and Deuteronomy, beware lest you be in your heart something unworthy, Belial. Belial translated as unworthy, but also means idolatry. In other words, ignoring the needy is like idolatry. Whoa. Um, we'll get back to that, the comparison, okay? Or tail bearing, right? You're saying something negative about your friend. So our sages equate that to idolatry, immorality, adultery, and bloodshed, murder. Whoa. Now, who doesn't say something a little kind of negative about another, from time to time, or, well, maybe more often or less often, whatever. Likewise, someone who gets angry is considered like an idolater, our sages say. Someone who's arrogant. So, and the sages say that the neglect of studying of Torah is equal to all of them, to all of those sins. As you waste time where you could have been studying Torah, that's equal to all of them. Now, these are things that we all step upon. We waste time. We may get angry here and there. We may say something negative about a friend. We may ignore those that are needy. All those are small little things in a sense that they're human things that would happen to all of us. Yet, even though it might be only a small little curtain that is flimsy, not very thick and dark, but when all of these things, or even just one of these things, are constantly being done, so the rope has become um, severed and it's constantly being severed the same place, it's going to sever everything ultimately, right? Or the metaphor of the clouds. They're flimsy clouds. They're not much, but if you have many, many of them, one on top of the other, or like the curtain. So, um, as a result, this does blemish the soul. This really does blemish the soul. So, therefore, as a result of this, by the bedtime Shema, there is something about taking upon yourself, and for severe things that we do, there's severe punishment, right? Like we mentioned, murder, idolatry, adultery. There are severe punishments. So the sages tell us that, because what are we blemishing? God's name that's in us, and that part in the divine presence of God that we affect. So therefore, the yud we affect the hey, the vav, and the hey, um, which results in severe things that can be a capital offense. So now, even if you never committed a capital offense yet, as the Alter Rebbe says, that each letter, from based on Kabbalah, the the neglecting to say the Shema is impairs the letter Yud, Tefillin the letter Hey, Tzitzis the letter Vav, prayer that we forget to pray, the latter Hey, all of those things um, are affecting God, right? And of course affecting us because that piece of God that we have in us it's affecting. And as he concludes the chapter, and the study of Torah is and the neglecting the study of Torah is equal to all of them. So in conclusion, Alter Rebbe is saying that a thinking person is going to have a contrite heart when they grow aware of the blemish that they cause, even in those lesser sins that everybody, does transgress. So this second part of having the contrite heart, a humble heart, means that when you recognize that even these small little things create a separation, and therefore, anytime we might engage in some or more than some of them, one or more of them, right? That we need to do tshuva. We need to do tshuva. So that's the conclusion. Chapter 7. My take on this is, wow, look at the complete ownership of our lives that we need to have. That we look at small things that we do that are very human, and we look at them as like they're large things, like they're big things. So much so that uh, where the capital punishment, if each letter is 4 different types of capital punishment, and we look at the small things that we did, just missing a prayer is like equates to some kind of capital punishment. Not that you're going to get the capital punishment, but he equates to it in the spiritual effect and the value of it. That's true ownership of one's life. That's really facing your stuff. So again, most people think your stuff would be just, the major things. But here it's even small things that we would step on, that we would think are insignificant, that those things, even just to waste time. Who doesn't waste time? Right? Okay, some people waste more time than others, but we waste time. But that's equated to, like, with the major things and terrible things that we could do in our lives. It's equated to that. Speaking just like, kind of negative about a friend of yours, you know, just kind of speak negative in it, like, big deal. I mean, who doesn't do that from time to time? Okay, maybe we try to be careful, but the point that I'm bringing out over here is what the author is saying in here, and the novelty is that if we look at it as like it's a big thing, even though it's a small thing, relatively speaking, but if we look at it as a big thing, that's how we can stop it from happening, right? That's how we can change direction. And I know in my life, um, that sometimes it can be a small little thing, and my natural reaction, especially when it comes to human relationships, it's not such a big deal, right? Now, first of all, if it's affecting another person, to you it's not a big deal. Maybe to them it is a big deal, right? So that's one thing. Um, and secondly, if we then, and this really takes that we can see from their perspective that for them it's a big deal. Even for us, it's nothing. Like, we'd get over it, and they don't get over it. It's a big deal for them. But then if we can make that small thing into a big deal, you know what happened? Probably wouldn't say that thing or do that thing to the other because it's a big deal to them. So God's saying over here, there's certain things that are small little things in the sense that they don't, they're small relatively in punishment. There's nothing punishing for them, right? Compared to like big stuff, you know, like, someone isn't circumcised. That's a huge thing. Someone missed a prayer, it's a small thing. But to God, that small thing is so big. You know, that, remember, you had to fast 61 fasts. If you got angry, like, like, come on, who doesn't get angry? 151 fasts. But that's all rabbinic. That's not that's all from the rabbis. That's not, biblically. It's there's no punishment biblically. Um, that's only like for the cleansing process. But if we look at it as a big thing, like the sages do, the sages say it's idolatry. It's similar to idolatry, or in fact, it is idolatry. Right? Why is it idolatry? Because, well, if God's present in that moment, and this is coming from God, how would you get angry? What would you be upset about? So, of course, that's not a simple and easy thing, but um, that's the reality. If God's present, then you wouldn't be angry. So it's idolatry. There's not, you don't get punished like idolatry, that you can get literally, um, you know, that can be the death sentence when it comes to idolatry. Two witnesses. I mean, not today, we don't have such a thing, but, the possibility of it is there. Excuse me. The point that I'm making over here, the ownership, and that's the whole point of it, the ownership of our lives, that if we can look at those small things, um, the way maybe your spouse takes it big, or your friend took it really big, and to you it was really nothing, and therefore we rationalize it away, and we make nothing out of it, and that, what happens? We're going to repeat it. We will. It's a promise. We will repeat it. What is the Alter Rebbe speaking in this chapter? The true and straight path to teshuva, for penitence. If you're looking for that, so then you're going to make those small things big. Now, you're not going to make it bigger than what it is. You're not going to overdo it, you know, but you're not going to underdo it. You're going to, if the other person sees it that way, and maybe you didn't even mean it that way, but if you can see their perspective, just as here we're talking about seeing from God's perspective. So if you can see from another person's perspective, and for how it was really hurtful and painful for them, so that will help you to change what you need to change. If you make light of it, then it's going to be very difficult. That's pretty powerful. That's my take on this. All right. Any questions? Any comments? Any thoughts? Um, Let me see on Facebook if there's any questions before I lose the feed. two question marks before you ask the question, please. Because I don't see any. And of course, please share I know now that. That would be great. Okay. I don't see any questions. David, if I missed something, please let me know. And Eliana, please share with us.
Oh, yes, thank you, Rabbi. I have a question, just regards to kind of the bigger picture of this, because when when you're talking about, separating that second hey off of the name, in a sense, desecrating the name, how does that relate to Exodus 20, the third commandment, where we're, not to swear falsely by his name, take his name in vain? If it does.
I mean, that's a serious offense.
But is there a connection of like any sin? Because obviously we're separating the hey from his name just from sin. So aren't we in a sense desecrating the name in before
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, yeah, but you're right. Good point. Very interesting point. Of course, there it means literally saying God's name, verbalizing God's name. Here, we're talking about in spiritual terms what you're doing, right? What you're doing to the divine presence of God that's represented by the letter Hey in God's name. So, that's in spiritual terms. So, in spiritual terms, are you desecrating God's name? Yes. But you're not, that prohibition is about verbalizing God's name. So, like if you're taking an oath and you're taking God's name in an oath and you're lying, right? Or you're taking, or you're just using God's name, verbalizing it, and you're not saying a blessing, right? We use God's name, like, Baruch Atah Hashem in a blessing. Maybe I should have some l'chaim over here and make a blessing, right? So then you're using God's name appropriately. But if you were just, throw out God's name just like that, that's using God's name in vain. So that is specifically about the verbalization of God's name. But in spirit, there's a commonality. Yes, absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions or comments? I see Davida. When the rope is cut and we do tshuva, isn't the rope stronger than before? We're going to get into that. We're taking thought at the time, a thought of the day, small things as big things, right? Is what we learned today. But that point that you made, Davida, yes, we will get there. Okay, so it will be definitely discussed. All right. Anybody else? Dove, Ilan, Karen, Taya, David, Ricky, Reggie, Tim, Jeffrey, Marcy. Okay. Marcy, please share with us.
So I'm struggling with this anger idea. Like,
go ahead.
There is such a thing as, what happened in Boston yesterday, for example, makes me very angry. But then you also talked about, how we have to allow for other people to have feelings, and that we need to accommodate their feelings as well, which I'm not suggesting is not a great idea. I'm not a psychopath. But, it feels a little both ways, right? They're allowed to have feelings, but we're not. And so I guess it's those kind of working on that bi-directional, how much feeling am I allowed versus how much not feeling am I allowed, how much anger am I allowed, what anger is permissible, and especially this week with Parshas Pinchas, it's all a piece.
Excellent question. Thank you for asking that so we can clarify. Yeah, excellent question. So is anger allowed? So it, and if it's anger that I'm feeling because something happened to me, which is usually the anger that we feel, right? Um, then that's a problem because that which happened to you is divinely orchestrated. So that becomes a problem, right? Because you know I feel hurt or pained or whatever. That doesn't mean if someone steps on your toes, you cry out. It hurts, okay, but that hurt and anger are not the same thing. So that being said, if someone acts in a way that is immoral and you're upset at them, even angry at them for their immorality, right? Then that's a different story. To be angry at the immorality of an individual, that is very different, right? Then there's room for anger, and sometimes it's the appropriate thing is to be angry. So you're correct, Marcy. You know, now, um, but you're angry at the immorality, and so for example, when Moshe Rabbeinu was angry at the Jewish people because of the spies when they came back with the report of the land of Israel and saying that we can't conquer, right? They're too strong, too powerful, and so on and so forth. He showed anger, the anger of God. He showed, and that was good because that anger, you know what it did? It humbled. It brought a contrite heart to the people. Um, and that's actually, thank you because this, clarifies the idea over here. Um, when we're talking about here a contrite heart over the negativity from within, that negativity is not our true real being. As the first thing that we look at is how lofty a soul I have. But then I have that part in me that is kind of ungeblasen, as we say in Yiddish. Like it's full of hot air. It's not a true reality. It's just full of self. But it's like a balloon, just burst it. It's not real. Your divine soul is real. That's great. But this greatness that the negative side the animal soul has and self-importance is ungeblasen, is full of hot air, is just and what Moshe Rabbeinu did to the Jewish people, he um, was angry at them, and from the anger, you know what that did? It took out the hot air, and they realized their mistake and they did teshuva. So yes, there is a place for that. I mean, you got to be on a kind of a lofty level that the anger will be used in that divine way, um, rather than self-righteousness. So we got to be careful with that, very careful with that. But yes, there is that room. Uh, furthermore, furthermore on that idea, um, um, yeah. So we have it in an appropriate manner. Um, and how to use it when and again it's like you gotta be very careful because usually the anger that we might be displaying is really a self-righteousness, so we have to be careful with that, um, right? So for example, you know when you see something on television, that some evil person did, and you're angry, I'm not certain that that's appropriate. I'm suggesting, suggesting that might be more self-righteousness, um, because, like, what's the anger? To be pained by what happened. That because you're hearing it in the news, like you're angry. where's the anger here doing anything? What's it doing when you heard about an evil act that someone perpetrated? I'm angry. Well, what are you angry? That might be self-righteous. You're hurt, you're pain because of the suffering that others. That's coming from a divine place. But if you're now with the perpetrator in front of you, and because of the immorality of that person, like Moshe Rabbeinu, like Moses, confronting the Jewish people with their immoral um, actions that they wanted to return to Egypt, they said, God, he's not going to be able to defeat through nature's ways, through miraculous ways is one thing, but through nature, we're not, it's not going to happen. That was immoral. It was wrong. Lack of faith. And so on. So his being angry affected something in the perpetrator. So, if someone perpetrated right in front of you, you know, like, someone abuses their child and someone, and you see that, and you give a real angry look at that person, to perhaps stop them in their steps. That's a very different story, because you're angry at the immoral abuse of that child. Then that makes sense. I hope that clarifies things. RC, does that resonate? Does that bring clarity?
Yeah, and
You're
like
breaking up. Go ahead.
Around so many incidents, I've felt pain, but this makes me angry because it happened here in my home.
Right.
And it's different. It feels different. It's weird.
I hear you. I hear. I suggest that that you see then then it's about you rather than about the 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 responsibility of you, right? Or there's a difference there. Okay. David is asking, is anger about anti-Semitic remarks self-directed or allowed? That's um, hmm. The anger needs to lead to something. Moshe Rabbeinu was angry at the Jewish people. It led to something. Um, so if it's if it's if it's going to lead to something, right? To do something about it. I'm angry at what this person wrote. Now I'm writing back to the editor, or I'm going to write something because I'm really upset at what this person anti-Semitic remarks. I'm going to do something, but just the anger, and it's not going to lead you to something. Again, that might be self-righteousness. So, Marcy, maybe also in your instance over here, if it leads to something that I act upon, or I do something to mitigate that, anti-Semitism, or that act of vile act or whatever, right? Again, like you see someone abusing their child, and you give them a very, stare at them, and give it, an eye to them, right? Kind of with an angry look. How could you act that way? Even to a stranger, maybe, whatever. I'm just giving, sometimes you need to say something, whatever it is. I'm just giving that by way of an example. The Vida, are the righteous held to a higher standards regarding transgressing minor mitzvahs than us because they know? Yes, absolutely correct. Correct. Simcha, does anger always lead to negativity? No. As Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, you know, got angry because that that anger burst the bubble, right? It was strong. That strength of the anger burst the bubble of the hot air that the Jews were full of and covered over the true faith that they have. And that's why they just turned on a dime. How did they turn on a dime? No miracles were shown that God was going to save the people, going to, deliver the people in battle when they come to the land of Canaan. So nothing happened. Nothing needed to happen. That um, covering over, like the metaphors that we're using over here, right? Whether it's the clouds, the curtains, it's covering over on the light of Hashem in our neshama that truly believes. So now when the anger is just removing that, pushing it aside. I hope that all becomes clear. Jane, dealing with the employee's attitude. How will I know that I'm being righteous or truly upset with their behavior? I think we've given some of the guidelines over here. If you're doing it out of responsibility, right? Moshe Rabbeinu did it out of a responsibility. And if you are in a position of responsibility, you have people who are, not fulfilling their job appropriately, so you have that responsibility. But that being said, not necessarily anger is the way that you're going to teach something, right? We're talking about getting something across. So if you have employees that are working for you, anger may not be the way that you will have the proper effect upon them, right? It may be another way. So, not so simple. Not so simple. Good question, though. Thank you, Jane. Jeff, please share with us.
So, this angry question is really, it's really interesting, especially when you talk about something like anti-Semitism or an evil act, and especially if it hits close to home. But, I think we do want, when we're angry and we write a letter to the editor, whoever does that still nowadays, that is an action that potentially could lead to something, and which is, I think, different than being angry and then going online and posting nasty things about the person that that said that angry thing. I mean, so I'm just saying that, especially with social media and a lot of stuff with politics, that there probably are a lot of actions you can take that may, in a small way, but maybe lead to change and not be a self-aggrandizing act to for yourself. Especially on Clubhouse and Instagram, there's like all kinds of crazy stuff going on. But I think in this case, I guess I'm asking, the thing, you're not going to go on and bomb the person's account, because that's not a good reaction to the anger. But maybe some other kind of social action, or of course rededicating yourself to study of Torah or something like that is a good action.
Right. Yes. Absolutely correct what you're saying. And again, just to reiterate the point that you just brought out, that we've been speaking of, is if the anger remains with you, then I would suggest that that's really a sign of just self-righteousness. But if it leads to doing something that has, like you said, a positive effect and can bring change, then perhaps that came from a good place. What you're angry at is the immorality of that individual. So what the attack needs to be is to the immorality of the person, like you said, rather than to the person themselves. and that's an important thing, Jeff, that you brought up that is very important to, that we should be very careful about, is to, speak to the issue, to the immorality, rather than to the person and try to destroy them. And that ties in, something we've been mentioning several times about, cancel culture and all of these things. That is, you're not addressing the issue, you're just addressing the person and trying to just destroy them, and that's immoral. So thank you for sharing that, Jeff. Taya, I think now I might have pronounced that correct. Am I correct there?
Yes, you're correct. Thank you, Rabbi. I think this conversation is very timely for me. I'm having some difficulties with some loved ones in my life. And the problem I'm having is I tend to get into like a loop or a spiral with them. So if they're going down this negative emotional path, they try to grab me into it as well. And I'm trying to separate and stay out of that emotional spiral. So I wanted to thank you for talking about this topic today, because a lot of these things are really resonating with me, and how I can better manage that and not go on a self-righteous kind of path. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's you're right. When you're dealing with loved ones, and they're in a certain place, um, and definitely they can bring us down if we're not careful. And on the other hand, we can be also trying to not go down that path, become self-righteous, um, and with our anger, right? And that also is not a healthy thing. So to be able to have that, a proper balance, um, is definitely, a challenge, a difficulty. One of the things, just maybe to bring out, that might be further helpful is, we're talking about ownership over here, but as we've mentioned in the past, that ownership means ownership over my stuff, right? Um, Owning your stuff, right? Face your stuff, and that's the important thing over here. We, there are going to be people that they have their stuff, and what happens is it becomes put in our face, and we think we need to face it. We don't need to face their stuff. We need to face how I respond to them. But I need to know how to respond to them, and not necessarily doesn't mean to respond to their stuff. I don't own their stuff. So I need to respond to them, and understanding the challenges that they have, the difficulties that they have, and what's bringing them down, spiraling downwards, and to appreciate and know that, and but not make it mine. And if I can appreciate and understand it, and not um, make it mine, then that will help us to, to have the proper boundaries. Does that help, Taya?
Yes, thank you. It brings a lot of clarity to what I'm dealing with. Thank you so much.
Great, wonderful, thank you. I have over here, Michael. You strive to redirect your anger into positive action? Yes, that's what we're saying. From that anger, if it leads to positive action, yeah, it seems stressing that now. Um, okay, all right, thank you, Michael. Very good. Excellent. Let me just see if I have anything here else. Ah. So Susanna says, I know now that repeating apparent lesser sins, and in particular neglecting the study of Torah that is equivalent to them all, can also affect the letters of the Tetragrammaton, severing our soul from its divine source. Accepting the four executions by the Kriya Shema at bedside can help us realize that this and bring us to tshuva. Oh, really well said. Thank you. Excellent, excellent. Okay. By the way, a reminder, today we will have learning of Maimonides, Rambam, 12:45. It's about 1:30ish. And come and join us. By the way, Sundays we will be doing it at 12:15. Sundays, 12:15. Half an hour earlier. Liba says, I know now that I have much stuff to face that I haven't realized before, especially those action sins which are comparable to idolatry. If I look at the significance of it as a larger matter, even if it's small, then that will propel me to own it, change it, and be on a true path to teshuva. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Yes. Anybody else over here that would like to share? Vilma.
So, hi, Rabbi.
Good morning.
Good morning. This thing about anger is something that I've always thought is a good idea to think about things and just be slow to anger. I'm a very patient person, and I try really hard not to judge anyone, by whatever reactions that I may see, because there's a lot I don't know about their days. And so working with different people and employees, you really have to become more aware of other people's actions and not take things personally, because then you can't be objective. And being objective is giving people grace and trying to understand where they're coming from a place of, you care about them. Other people's emotions are not yours. We can't take them and then make them ours and make them personal. That's not good, to be a reactive person, just to react to other people like a pinball. I don't know how you can get anything done being angry or emotional all the time. It's not healthy. So, but what it is telling us, emotions do tell us something about, whatever situation's going on, we should try to figure it out. Think about it, not necessarily react to it.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. Very, very good. What happens is one angers towards themselves, Davita's asking. So if you're angry at yourself because of your lack of morality, and that leads you to change something, that's amazing, right? But we have to be careful with that. We have to be careful with this anger, because usually it's misused. Usually it's misused. Moshe Rabbeinu got angry, and there was misuse in his anger. The whole story with the rock that he hit, right, as opposed to talking to it. A minor little thing. I mean, that's a very deep thing, and I'm not going to go into the nuance of it. But just so we should understand that anger is something that we have to be very careful with. So even if it's self-directed, the term the Alter Rebbe uses in Tanya, in chapter 27, in the first part, is more about bitterness, not anger. To be bitter at yourself, upset with yourself when you did something wrong, and you feel it, right? Not being objective, right? Because being objective is, it's a small thing, but if you're bitter about it, even if it's a small thing, what will happen? You can turn on a dime, and you can redirect yourself from that negative behavior, from that, thing that was wrong that you did. Might be a small thing, but the bitterness allows you to is the vehicle of change. More on that we'll learn when we get there. Okay. Folks, amazing. As every day, we have so much that we share and we learn together. It's wonderful. Thank you all for being a part. Again, a reminder today at 12:45, 3 chapters of Rambam. We're in the laws of teshuva, by the way. We're going to almost conclude it today. So it's a good time to jump on. That's on Zoom, 770, 6085. Do come and join us. Or it's going to be also on Facebook, Chabad ZK. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Tzich and Kadesh in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya every day, at least 6 days a week. Have a wonderful day, a good Erev Shabbos, and a wonderful Shabbos. Be well.
Good Shabbos, Rabbi.
Good Shabbos.
Thank you.